Researchers at Barrow Neurological Institute received a $2.5 million grant from the U.S. Defense Department to study possible links between traumatic brain injury and Alzheimer's disease. Dr. Cha-Ling Pua is the co-director of Barrow's Neuroanalytics Center, and she joins us now. Doctor, good to have you. Welcome to Arizona Horizon.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
So genetics, predicting recovery from traumatic brain injury, susceptibility? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, so traumatic brain injury is actually very common. We're talking about up to 3 million new cases a year in the United States alone. And many of these individuals will go on to suffer long-term effects, majority of which is things like affecting their memory, their ability to think, how fast they process information. And what many people may not realize is that a lot of these individuals who experience traumatic brain injury, they're also at greater risk of developing Alzheimer's disease later in life. But it's not fully understood yet why this happens and how this happens. And so what our study is trying to do is to identify those who are at greatest risk. And we see this as sort of a first step in a multi-step process that would hopefully allow us to develop new treatments, new drugs that could potentially help improve people's recovery, cognitive recovery from head injury, and also prevent them from having Alzheimer's disease in the future.
So basically what, a genetic predisposition to getting dementia, Alzheimer's late, but also a predisposition to not getting it. Could there be a genetic component to protecting against those kinds of things later in life?
That's exactly what we're trying to see. So the idea is that everyone are born with certain amounts of genetic risk. And we know that Alzheimer's disease, for example, there's a huge genetic predisposition to it. And we're not just looking at one gene, we're just going to look at a variety of genes, which individually may not confer risk, but cumulatively they could have an effect on the outcome. And so what we're trying to do is to see whether or not that risk will enhance someone. Let's say you're unfortunate to develop a head injury sometime in your life. Would those two things together put you on a path or accelerate a path towards developing Alzheimer's disease later on? And conversely, can we identify people who somehow are born with some sort of protective factors that we could then leverage to try to develop new drugs that could help everyone else?
And I would imagine the number of head injuries would play a factor in this as well.
Yeah, that's right. So there is studies which suggest that the more injury you have, the more likely that is to happen. However, we do also see people who develop Alzheimer's disease who may have had just a very minor injury in their life.
And there are people who develop Alzheimer's who may have never had injury.
Exactly.
So it's still kind of a wide open field there, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And that's the grant. So how are you going to do this? How does this study go about?
So essentially, we're trying to leverage sort of big data. We're going to harness big data to try to understand more about disease process. And what the study is going to be is it's going to probably be one of the largest one to date, looking at the relationship between traumatic brain injury and Alzheimer's disease. We will be analyzing data from over 5,000 individuals who have volunteered their time, their clinical information by participating in 2 large ongoing studies of TBI and Alzheimer's disease. And by combining these 2 studies, by analyzing the data, our hope is that we can then examine what are the factors or combination of factors that could put someone at greater risk of this happening.
So again, number of injuries, severity of injuries, biomarkers, all of these things can now be looked. Is this the kind of thing that AI could help with?
We will be using some artificial intelligence in our analyses, not just to predict who will be the ones who may develop Alzheimer's disease or may run into trouble from head injury, but also in terms of identifying potentially the biomarkers that we're talking about.
Now, you'll be following patients at Barrow?
Yeah, one of the very exciting aspects of this study is that we will be enrolling about 400 or 500 individuals with head injury of varying severity. And then we'll follow them over time, looking at their cognitive health. And also we'll ask them to volunteer and sample their blood with their consent to study, what are the genes or the proteins that could protect against developing cognitive impairment after head injury.
What kind of time frame are we talking about for this study?
Yeah, this will be for each individual. They'll experience that over like 2 years. This whole study will take over 4 years, in which we'll be enrolling as many individuals as we can in the first 2 to 3 years, and that will give us enough time to follow them and see what happens.
I was going to say, because after 2 years, you got pretty good for 2 years, but then you got 4 years. And for folks who might develop something after 4 years, I mean, that's still going to be a little bit of the Wild West there, huh?
Yeah, but for that we go back to that bigger cohort that we're talking about.
Yes, there you go.
Exactly.
So it sounds like also we've done so many shows on Alzheimer's, and it's always still a mystery, and it's just always frustrating for those to a certain degree. There have been advancements, but it's always frustrating. Is this genetic makeup, biomarkers, is this the new frontier for this kind of research?
Yes and no. I mean, 10 years ago, we were talking about, the Human Genome Project and how it's going to revolutionize medicine. It didn't really come to pass as quickly as we hoped, but I think it will. I think it's taken us pretty far, and hopefully it'll continue to help us understand more about how the brain works and how we can help people who unfortunately develop the condition.
And when you talk about, again, this study and finding ways to treat, we're talking medications, aren't we?
Yeah.
Is that promising? Are there things just waiting to happen? What do you see out there?
I think so. I mean, one of the huge breakthroughs recently is the availability now of new treatments for Alzheimer's disease. Even though they are imperfect, they may have very modest effects, but it's still a first step.
Yes.
And I think there are many others coming in the pipeline. And what our study is hoping to contribute is to build more towards that roadmap of what are the things that we should target, what particular drugs may show promise, and hopefully that can expedite the whole process.
Well, Doctor, best of luck. We're rooting for you, that's for sure. And congratulations on the research and the grant, and thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.